Hey everybody. Just so you know, Alyssa's having a little bit of technical difficulties, but she'll be joining soon. If you can, because I don't think we got a lot of responses in the Slack, um, you can answer this question in the chat, but what conflicts do you all face the most in your chapter? So like thinking about things that can lead to drama, how does that show up? You guys can go ahead and put that in the chat. If it's helpful to get the ball rolling, some things we usually think about, or like clicks that might be in your chapter, power struggles. Are there some other things that show up for you all too? And feel free to type it in the chat. Okay, listen.
Hi guys, sorry, I'm having issues sharing my screen. So I left and came back and I'm gonna try. It's possible that I don't know, it doesn't always work on my laptop, which I'm on right now. So we'll try. Okay. Let me share my screen. Is it working? Can you guys see it or is it just a black screen?
It's just a black screen right now and it says loading.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. Okay, well,
Do you want me
let
to
me
share it
just
for you?
It's okay. I think I can just share it like not in a slideshow view. I don't understand why it doesn't work, but
Okay.
for the sake of time, I will just share. Let me make it bigger. Okay. So sorry. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your patience. So I can't share in presenter view, but I think you guys can see it in this view, right?
Yes.
Great. See a lot of black screens, so I would love to see your faces. It's not always fun to talk into just black boxes with names. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. For those of you who I don't know, though I recognize a lot of names on here, I'm Alyssa Bernhard. I'm the managing director of Omega Phi Alpha. I also have a master's degree in conflict management, and I do a lot of conflict skills trainings. I've done a few different ones for the sorority. Actually, we have a workshop called Being Ready for Conflict, and all of that information is I think it's on OK Portal, but I've done a lot of different like iterations of conflict workshops. I feel like conflict is always a good topic. I know some of you are probably like, oh, I do not like conflict. I avoid conflict at all costs. Yeah, a lot of people do. But if you are a chapter officer, then you know that often you face conflict in your chapter. And we hear from you all often that you need assistance managing conflict, or you just have questions about the best way to go about something. So hopefully this will help. I've tried to make it sort of customized to the situations that we hear the most about, but I'm going to get through the workshop. And then at the end, I would love to answer questions. Or if you have specific conflict situations that you're like, this happens all the time. I don't know what to do, or this is going on right now and I need some help with it. This is a safe space, and I would ask it, as we do enter conversation about conflicts at specific chapters, that you all keep what is said here, especially at the end when we go into maybe some specific scenarios. So let's get started. The purpose of this workshop is to equip you all as chapter leaders with the tools that you need to have difficult conversations and to resolve conflict before it spirals out of control or blows up into something that doesn't need to be. So at the end of this training, you will understand the need to be a leader through conflict. You'll have some tools for initiating difficult conversations. And I hope that we can talk about how to set boundaries as necessary. And most importantly, I really hope that all of you gain confidence for managing conflict in your chapter and staying on top of conflict situations. So, why should we manage conflict? Well, conflict is inevitable, as you all probably do know. You It can come out of unexpected places. Sometimes you may experience conflict that you're like, where in the world did this come from? Or I had no idea that this person was feeling this way. Um, and I mean, sometimes even the smallest things can really lead to some amount of turmoil within a chapter. So, it's really, really important to have an environment that fosters and cultivates idea sharing, diverse ideas and experiences, and without gossiping. It will just lead to a healthier chapter without attacking or gossiping. You all are leaders, so it's your responsibility to set an example in your chapter. Oh. So here are some examples of difficult situations that the chapter health team, experiences most often, but put more in the chat if you have some that are not mentioned here. So one is power struggles between officers. An officer who is not satisfying the responsibilities of their role. Maybe they think they are, but they're not. Um, an officer who maybe oversteps their role, maybe they're doing things that are actually someone else's job and they're not giving that person a chance to do them or helping them through it. Members who violate confidentiality. This could be, we see this most often, I think, with like CSB, like someone is on the CSB, they've signed a confidentiality agreement, but then they share things that happen in CSB meetings throughout the chapter. But we also see it a lot in voting, especially when you do secret ballot voting. Or I know some chapters, their voting process is like, there's some time for like pro con pro or discussion of candidates, and all of that information is supposed to stay within that chapter meeting, and sometimes we see that that spreads out of chapter meeting and can foster, bad will and bad feelings. Sometimes unresponsive members are really, really difficult situations, or they can lead to chapter leaders not really knowing what to do or what the next steps are or like how to even handle it. It can be pretty frustrating. So I think just having some tools to initiate direct conversations will be helpful. I think all of our chapters have problems with members not attending events or maybe being like chronically late to events. In general, maybe we could view that as like just not being very respectful of the person who organized the events, the organization, like for service, the organization that you may be serving through the event. And then also cliques. This is something we hear honestly more than I wish we heard. I wish we never heard about cliques, but we do hear from members of the chapter pretty frequently that officers have formed a clique, or there's just like a bunch of different cliques of members and it doesn't feel cohesive. It just doesn't feel like everyone has a place in the organization. Are there any like difficult situations or conflicts that you all have in your chapter that are not listed here? Maybe one that I didn't think of that I didn't put here, or like financial issues, like officers who don't stick to their budget and they just spend beyond their budget. They don't really understand why they shouldn't do that. I think that does create conflict sometimes. All right, so I wanted to just talk about these are just 10 reasons for not having difficult conversations, and then we're going to talk about 10 reasons that you should do it anyway. Um I think often we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We hear that a lot, and that's common outside of the sorority. People don't feel comfortable having difficult conversations because they're concerned that they'll hurt someone's feeling, or the person will like misinterpret what they say and take it the wrong direction, or they won't be receptive to it and might put a friendship or a relationship at risk. Maybe it will open you to retaliation, or the person, like, they might not receive it well and they'll attack you back. Sometimes I think we are like, well, there's nothing in it for me, especially when there are smaller issues. And when we think about the sorority and chapter leadership, sometimes it's like, oh, well, that person didn't show up. It's on them, not on me. Like, there's no reason that I need to follow up with them. But then it spirals and, like, actually you are needed. Sometimes when we are avoidant of conflict, it's like, well, what if it makes the problem worse? Like, what if I don't actually resolve the problem? Maybe you don't feel supported to have difficult conversations. You don't have people in your chapter that will back you up or support you to have the conversation. Or maybe you just think nothing will change anyway. Olivia, thanks for sharing. Gossiping and cliques is the issue that you have to address the most. Totally. People definitely do find groups. And I always say, yeah, it's pretty normal. Like, you're not gonna like everyone in the sorority, especially if you have a bigger chapter. Like, everyone isn't gonna like everyone. Everyone isn't gonna want to be best friends, and that's okay. It's more about like having shared respect for each other. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And 10 reasons for having difficult conversations anyway. It is possible for you to communicate honestly without hurting feelings. It's possible to communicate accurately so someone doesn't twist your words or misinterpret them. You don't know if someone's going to be receptive unless you try. Without honesty, there's not genuine relationships and friendships. If you come in with a collaborative mindset, the other person is less likely to respond defensively. Engaging in these difficult conversations will help you increase your self-esteem. It will give you a lot of practice in being honest and communicating well. And then the more you succeed, the less you'll be bothered and the more that you'll want to do it. And I think this is especially important for chapter leaders, that if you take this risk to have this difficult conversation and be honest, you're really leading by example, and others may take that risk as well. And things do change when people communicate, for one, when people communicate. And then when you communicate honestly and in an appropriate way, it also helps things change and really foster a different culture. So let's talk about the steps to manage difficult conversations. I want to put a caveat here that, like, this is just one way. There are a lot of different ways that you can manage difficult conversations. There's a lot of frameworks to managing conflict, a lot of different tools. If this is something you're interested in, I'm happy to talk more or coach you through a specific situation if you need additional tools. I tried to sort of put together what I feel are like the easiest steps. It's the easiest to remember. And like each step has like a actionable item that you can remember. So first we have to identify the need for the conversation. So the chapter health team and I kind of tried to brainstorm, like, okay, when does a leader in the chapter need to address something? So when multiple members are bringing a situation to your attention, so this could be like for these groups or cliques that form, like if you get 3 or more complaints, or if you're getting complaints about a particular officer and the way that they're doing something, we really think like 3 or more complaints from members is like, okay. And really, you can like sound the alarm bells at the first complaint, that would be good. It would be good for you to be like, okay, one person brought this to my attention. I need to address this head on. But for sure, when you're getting the complaint multiple times and sometimes I think the first time we hear it, we're like, oh, well, it's one person. Maybe it's just that person, it's an isolated thing. But when you hear the same complaint more, I think it just adds the pressure of like, okay, this is real and I need to deal with this. When an officer fails to complete a task the first time, we feel pretty strongly that officers come into their role, they have expectations, they have manuals, guides, they like know what their position is, they know their roles and responsibilities. And so nipping that as quickly as possible is really important. As soon as you feel that someone has overstepped into your position or has done something that you were supposed to do or make a decision that was your decision to make, like as soon as that happens, a conversation should occur. Anytime you get a report of a confidentiality breach, you should address that immediately. And then when you have an officer that refuses to cooperate, in any number of ways, this should be addressed immediately. So that's step one. We have to identify there's a need for a conversation. Here are some examples and what we believe are like the timeframes for having the conversation. Step two is to frame the conversation. So definitely considering the right time and place is really important. So for example, like in the middle of a chapter meeting, probably not the right time or the right place. But could you set a time to meet with someone after a chapter meeting? Sure. Before a chapter meeting, nah. You know, are they going to be upset and then they have to go into chapter meeting and carry on like nothing happened? So I think really considering the right time and the right place, and setting the right tone, really stating your intention and your desired outcome. So this could look like telling the person, asking them if they're available at whatever day and time that you want to meet with them, seeing if they mutually agree on a place, making sure the place is appropriate for like having a conversation. And then tell them like your intent is to address some concerns that you have and reach a mutually beneficial agreement or resolution that you want to hear them out. You want to hear what's been going on. You want to understand why these things are happening. So just being really open, and making sure the other person knows like you're open to conversation and want to hear what they have to say. And another way to frame the conversation is to set ground rules. I actually think there's a whole list of ground rules either on Drive or OPA portal. I can look for it. But some ground rules are like, I will not interrupt. So I'll always wait my turn. Um, that's like really the main one. The main ground rule is like, I will listen without interrupting. I'll take a break if I need a break. But you could come up with many, like, certain words that you're not going to use. You're not going to make accusations. You'll speak for yourself and only yourself. There's a bunch of different ground rules that you can set in a conversation. And it's good for both people to contribute to the ground rules. The third step is active listening. This is hard. This might be the hardest part of having tough conversations. Um, because like we're always thinking about our role in the conversation or what we're thinking. It's just like we live in a world full of distractions and it's just really hard to give full focused attention. So, you know, don't have your phone or your computer or your Apple Watch or whatever, like eliminate distractions, put everything on do not disturb. Um, really any other distractions or things that you have found can be distracting for you, remove those from this conversation so you're able to give your full focused attention. Having open body language is really important. And also, it can be really hard for some of us. So, making sure like you don't have your arms crossed or, you're inviting, you're not like turned away from them. Just that your body language signals that you're open and that you want to have this conversation. Be patient. It can be really hard to listen. Really hard. And especially when there's a challenging situation, if you're an officer and you've heard all these different sides and then you're trying to get to the bottom of it, it's really hard to just be patient and listen and like not interrupt. But it's really important to remind yourself, like, I'm going to let them talk, I'm going to acknowledge them, and we'll get through it. It's totally appropriate for you to take notes. I would recommend like pen and paper notes, not a computer, because that's like a block and a distraction. And like not trying to write everything down, but if there's like certain things that you want to come back to or you want to make sure you address to like take notes of like, okay, this person said this and I want to come back to that. And especially if you're a leader who's sort of like facilitating or mediating a conversation, or maybe you're not directly involved in the situation, but it's come to your attention and you're addressing it. Don't like try to remain neutral, like don't have any body language or signifiers that like you don't believe them or you agree with the people who came. Just really try to separate that and listen as much as possible. I see your comments in the chat. Keep them coming. I will circle back to them. Another important step, the fourth step of having difficult conversations to manage your emotion. I just want to take a minute and acknowledge this is really hard, especially if you are actively engaged in the conflict or if it's impacting you and your role within your chapter. So, I would say in terms of like framing the conversation, like when you identify a time and place to have it, maybe you've given yourself a little bit of space or you've been able to like vent to an appropriate party, like you've released some of that emotion before you enter the conversation itself. Taking deep breaths is really helpful, especially like if you feel a surge of emotion, or like, you feel that burn behind your eyes, like you might cry or you're like feeling angry and like you're just gonna explode. Take a few deep breaths. And it's okay to acknowledge like I need a break, like if you're feeling a little overwhelmed or you just need to process information that was given to you so that you don't exhibit intense emotions. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say like I need a break. I need to walk away. I'll be back. um I would say know and understand your triggers and like what are hard boundaries for you of like, oh, I'm not going to let this person say this to me or talk to me in this way. And maybe those are also things where you need to take a break. Don't push your emotions onto someone else. I think this is probably the most important thing. I encounter this with active members of the sorority and alumni. I think it's really important to like always assume good intentions. So even if you've heard from 10 people that this person did XYZ and you might be thinking, well, if 10 people say it's true, it's probably true. Um but the whole point of this is to really again remain neutral, gather information and really facilitate a conversation. So try not to push your emotions or opinions onto someone else. We all have opinions and we all have emotions and situations, and that's fine. You are more than welcome to have those, right? No one's saying that you can't have them, but try to think like, is this a me thing? Is this a me emotion? Or, and am I keeping that to me or am I putting it on someone else? So try not to push your emotions on someone else. And know that sometimes emotions may flare the conflict, it may make it worse. Again, know it's okay to pause or take a break. And then seeking to clarify is a really, really, really important part of conflict management and resolution is asking questions. So clarify the questions. If they say something, you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Tell them that. Like, what do you mean when you say that? Do you have an example of when that has happened? Um, or if they're like, well, this made me feel this way, or I feel this way because, and they don't give an example, like because of, you can say, well, like, when did you feel that way? When were you made to feel that way? So really, and then another way to seek to clarify is to like summarize and repeat back to someone. So, like, okay, what I hear you saying is, and you're like summarizing what they've told you and repeating it back. And that gives them an opportunity to say, yes, that's what I'm saying. Or like, well, kind of, but not, and they can clarify what it is. So, seeking to clarify is really important. Try again, you still have those ground rules of like not making accusations, speaking for yourself. So remember that when you ask clarifying questions. And speaking of speaking for yourself, always use I statements. It's just like human nature that when someone's like, well, when you, it has that tone, right? It has that tone of like, oh, well, they're telling me what I'm doing. And it definitely like sets people off. It really, really can make the conflict a lot worse. And this is really hard. This takes a lot of practice to do, especially if you haven't engaged in difficult conversations regularly. I mean, I still often have to do this for myself and remind myself like, oh, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anyone else. And sometimes I even say that, like when people ask me questions or it feels like someone's baiting me in a conversation, I'll say, well, I can only speak for myself. Like I can't speak for everyone. Um, so here's some examples of how we can do that. The first one is a framework of nonviolent communication, which is like you identify your feeling and you identify your need, and then you put it together. So, like when you say or do X, it makes me feel X because I need or value X. So, an example might be like when you do things that are within my position, it makes me feel frustrated, disappointed, invalidated, any number of things that it makes you feel because I need or value. This could be like trust, like trying to think what's another one, like another way to say it. I'm not gonna be able to think of one, but you can think of like what you need. And I can share there's like a framework of like the six needs and six feelings. I personally think there's like more than six, but there's like six basic needs and six basic feelings. So like one is safety. Um, so like, if safety is something that you're feeling, you can say like, I need or value safety in this XYZ. And then making a request. So would you be willing to give me a chance to do this or come directly to me if you have a concern about my position and what I am or am not doing? So you can make a request of the other person. A shorter way of doing this is I feel when you because. So there's no request. Maybe you're not really like defining a feeling or a need. You're just being a little bit more direct about it. So acknowledgement is really important. I feel like our members do a really good job at this. I feel like our members are really empathetic and compassionate people and really do acknowledge members' feelings and needs. So here are some just examples of how you can acknowledge someone. So I appreciate you taking the time to help me understand where you're coming from. Your perspective makes sense to me. I understand how you might see things that way. I recognize that this is a very emotional situation for you, and I really want to be sensitive to that as you're acknowledging their emotions and feelings. I really appreciate you being so open. I hadn't considered it from that angle. Thank you for explaining it to me. The really important thing here is when we're acknowledging and validating is that we don't say, but. So we don't say, your perspective makes sense to me, but, or I understand how you might see things that way, but this is how I see them. So these are like the complete sentences of like acknowledging and validating someone. Another thing that's really important when we're thinking about conflict and difficult conversations is like really finding common ground. So, for those of you who have officers who overstep their role or micromanage, they're overstepping their role because they want what's best for the organization. Or that's what I would assume. Maybe there's nefarious intent, but I typically don't assume that. So it's like, that's a common ground. That's what you can say to yourself. Okay, this person is doing this because they want what's best for the sorority. And I also want what's best for the sorority. But how do we like come together in a way that works for everyone? So I think everyone has common desires, especially within the sorority. Like we're all here for a similar reason or goal. And likely you share common concerns. You just don't know it because you haven't talked about it. And again, I think there's the same feelings, going back to that same example of like an officer overstepping. The officer who's overstepping is probably annoyed or frustrated. And then the officer who they're overstepping into is also probably annoyed or frustrated. So it's the same feelings. You share those same feelings. And it's just a matter of like talking through that, acknowledging that you have the same feelings. And now we have to figure out what to do about it. So the next step is really to brainstorm solutions. There's so many different ways that you can brainstorm, but I wanted to give some like two examples of like a solution brainstorming that you could do. Especially if it's a bigger group of people, or like if you as the officer are mediating between other people in the sorority. Round robin is a good way to do this, so you can take turns sharing ideas for solutions. There never should be a requirement to share. Some people don't want to share, or maybe they just kind of want to like feel it out before they share. Somebody should be the person writing down the ideas and just go back and forth until there's no more ideas being shared. Then you would go back through the ideas. You could read them, or if you've written them down, show them, and then you can go through and prioritize the ideas. And once you've identified like, a top few, then you can talk out those and determine like, how is this a lasting solution? Is it viable? Like, can we actually implement this and will it work? And really come to like, okay, this is what we're going to do about this situation, and write it down. Another option is just like an impromptu brainstorm, so less structured. Everyone can just call out their ideas. Again, someone will record the ideas. Those are discussed and then prioritized. So similar, just some are structured and some aren't. Another idea, if you have like really if it's like a really intense situation, or there's a lot of people involved and the people have strong personalities, or like you're not sure how this is going to work, you can also write your ideas down like on post-its. Like you can pass out post-its to everyone, and everyone like writes down their own ideas, and then you can bring the post-its all together and someone can read them out loud and prioritize the post-its. So that way, like, the ideas are private or confidential, like you don't know who shared the ideas. Um, Sometimes that's better if like tensions are really high. And then finally is when there's been a challenging situation, especially in a chapter, there's going to be some trust that has been broken, and you're going to have to repair that. So, reflect and apologize. Be sincere. Again, this kind of goes back to acknowledging, like, apologizing if you did something that hurt the person's feelings that you feel sorry for, or that led to something. Don't just apologize to apologize. Like, be sincere. Like, I for sure am not in the business of apologizing to people if I don't mean it. So I wouldn't expect you guys to do that either. So mean it if you're going to say it. And then be accountable. You've acknowledged a lot of things, you've found the common ground, you've brainstormed solutions. So be accountable to your role in the conflict and then in the solutions. Acknowledge the work that's on you, commit to change. Just acknowledge that like sometimes these things take time, especially depending on how it's affecting the chapter, how big it is. Um, like we can't really solve everything overnight, but like be great if we could, but we just can't. So knowing that like you're going to need some time, and maybe set like some regular check-ins. So if it's officer related, maybe like at every executive board meeting, we're going to check in about this thing. We're going to check in on where we are for the solution that we agreed on. Most importantly, your actions speak louder than your words. So if you agree to do something, do it, follow through, commit to it. Okay, now I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to read the chat and answer questions. Okay, lack of attention to communication from officers. Okay, so officers are communicating what's happening during chapter, but the communication is not really being received or read. So Emma, for that one, I would say like maybe asking your chapter, maybe like polling your chapter to find out like, is this the best way to communicate these things? Like, are these chats working? Is there a better way to communicate? Um, that's frustrating. I feel you. I write emails sometimes and I wonder, am I writing into the void, or are there people on the other end? So I could see how that could be frustrating. But maybe there's like, and maybe the way things are being communicated, you could just ask, you could facilitate a conversation in general, like at a chapter meeting and say like, what's the best way? It would be good to come with solutions too, like, or you could survey your chapter too. Taylor, I don't know if you're here, but do you have other thoughts on like communication with chapter?
Yes, I'm here. I was folding laundry, so fun. We love multitasking. But another way that could work, or could be like a good way to get feedback is like your chapter wellness event. Having like a piece of that space just be like, how are we doing as leaders with our communication with you? Are these things working? Are they not working? Does it more so work if we communicate via Discord or something? Or is Facebook kind of where we want to load all the important things? Or maybe we create a platform on our school Blackboard, and all the important things live there. But just communicating each semester on like what is working, what isn't working, and trying to adapt with where your chapter is currently is always a key to success, I have learned. So I will always recommend that.
Anyone want to share, like, if they have ways of communicating with their members that really is successful? Maybe that would be helpful to Emma.
So for my chapter, we have a group meet, and if something's really important that an exec member sends, they'll say, please heart if you read it, just to make sure people are acknowledging it. And our secretary also types up a minute sheet each week for chapter. And I know that's been received with a lot of positive feedback from girls, so they don't have to continuously scroll through our chapter slides. It's just one doc with all the information. We also have a Microsoft Teams with all of our things so people can review it if needed. So it's a lot of different communication techniques, but I think we only ever have an issue every once in a while where somebody has to ask when, where, or what is an event. So I think having a lot of different means going on can also help.
Yeah, Emma, I know you left and came back. We were talking about different ways that might be helpful to communicate. So Olivia was sharing some of the ways that her chapter does that. The minutes is really great. Honestly, only a couple years ago, I realized that chapters like minutes were on slides, and I was like, "Wait, what's happening?" And they would like send me their minutes into a slideshow, and I was like, "No, I don't want a slideshow. I want your document with your minutes." So yeah, I think that's great. And especially like I know every chapter does like chapter meetings differently and minutes differently. But like literally meeting minutes are like a recap of the most important things that were discussed and voted on during chapter. So if you miss a meeting, you should be able to like scan the minutes and you know what is happening in the chapter. So that's a really great point, is like making sure your minutes from every meeting are like easily digestible. Even for like national board of directors meetings, we do the minutes. And so, like it may be like convention 2024. It's like, okay, conversation about volunteers. I don't like detail everything. That's like, okay, final list of volunteers here, like click through, you can see the volunteers. So like super high level, anything we vote on, I try to like highlight it, and any like upcoming events, I try to like highlight it a certain color. So if there's like votes, action items, or future events, highlight those on the minutes. That can help too. Anyone else have communication tactics that work well in their chapter that they think would help if um, it doesn't feel like members of the chapter are reading communication?
Our chapter has like two group me's. So like one is for like all the important information, and then one's kind of like if people have like questions or stuff, so then people know to check like the really important one, like often.
That's a good idea. So then you don't have to like scroll through to see like, what did I miss something that's important?
I was also gonna say sometimes if there's something like really pressing that needs to be like filled out or anything, we'll do like an exit ticket. So we'll just be like during our chapter meeting, just like pull out your phone right now and do this before you leave. So I feel like that really like helps hold people accountable if something like needs to be filled out right now.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Great. Those are some good ideas. Let's see. Yeah, so going back to Olivia, your thought on like gossiping and cliques, and then inclusivity and connecting is a group effort. We were just talking tonight about some ways of like fostering, the chapter health team met before this, and we were talking about some ways to like foster connection or sisterhood. And I think several chapters do this, but having like themed chapter meetings. Other things are like, oh, one chapter was really struggling with clicks a couple of years ago. And what they did is like drew numbers as you like walked into chapter meeting, and then you had to sit in those numbered orders. So you were like sitting with different people at chapter, or they would do like prompts, like find someone who has like, you would find someone who has a birthday in the same month as yours, and that's like the person that you would sit with at chapter. Because sometimes like these really come out a lot at chapter meetings where like everyone shows up together, like everyone in the same group shows up together, sits together, does everything together. So there are some different ways where you can like force people to break up that. Like one chapter in particular was having issues with like families always sitting together. So it was always like bigs and littles, like, and that was like the group. And so they kind of were able to split it up by doing these like more structured ideas. Does anyone else have thoughts on how to foster like inclusivity and acknowledge that it is like a group effort and everyone's responsible for it? Um, the chapter that did that, what chapter are you from, Olivia?
I'm from Alpha Rho at Virginia Tech.
Okay, the chapter that did those like random ideas was Alpha Lambda. So it could be a good chapter to ask how they did that, or any other ideas. Okay, Olivia, you said we've not had much conflict, but officers micromanaging. Yeah, it's pretty annoying. I think this is really rooted in like, and these are things that you need to have like direct conversations about. Like, hey, I can tell that you're passionate about XYZ, or you really want XYZ to get done. I hear you. I'm working on it. Here's my plan for that. Like sometimes these are really rooted in just like the ability to trust the other officers and trust that like they're going to do their job. Like they signed up for it and they're going to do it. And then you being able to like follow through and prove that like you're going to do it. Um, does anyone else have any thoughts on like how to manage that like overstepping of roles or another thought I have is like sort of if you set like clear timelines. So like in your executive board meetings, if it's like, okay, so and so is going to do this by this date, like, I know it's sort of like a subliminal message, but like if you're setting dates and like setting timelines and committing to things, that can help someone who is more of a micromanager feel maybe more secure and like, okay, well, they have until this date to do this. Like that's what they've agreed upon. And regularly checking into that. Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks for coming. Any other like situations that you guys encounter that you want some help with, or any thoughts?
While you guys brainstorm, I'll also add on with the micromanagers. What is usually helpful, I would say, is if you are the president, like setting a precedent around like goal setting at the beginning of the semester and like checking in at the mid semester, doing an eval with all your officers to see how they're doing, if they feel like they are struggling. and just leaving space for them to like check in on how they're doing with the goals that they set. So then it doesn't, even if sometimes you might feel like you can lean into micromanaging as a president, I feel like it's really easy to do so because you are managing the team. And so just making sure that that's able to like hold them accountable because they set those goals, but also like holding yourself accountable to make sure that they can accomplish those goals. And even when you do have like your exec board retreat, asking him like the question of like, well, how would you like me to lead in this space? Like, what do you need from me as I lead you all? That simple question might help with like just learning their work style. Some folks might need like little random encouragement, while others, they might be like, leave me alone, let me do my work, and I will show up to the meeting. I will give you the updates. It will be great. But others might need support and maybe don't know how to ask. So you even asking that simple question at the start of the semester can go a really long way and help just alleviate any issues down the road.
One thing that we've noticed a lot that I didn't touch on, but I think is really important to touch on is that it has seemed like since many of you joined, or maybe your entire college career has been during, the first couple years were COVID, and maybe your the interactions were a little different. Like, something we definitely noticed is that members were a lot more bold in written communication, and they were saying things in writing that they definitely would not say to someone's face. So I think remembering that, like, especially in a world where like we have these group chats or we text a lot, just like just checking yourself and like, would I say this to this person's face? If not, like, probably shouldn't text it to him. That's something we notice a lot. And then another thing, again, like, I don't think I can stress this enough, but like assuming good intentions, like everyone has joined the sorority presumably for similar reasons: to serve others, to make friends, to gain leadership experience. These are like the reasons people tell us that they join Omega Phi Alpha. And it's pretty consistent across the board. So it's a good reminder to yourself of like, okay, we're all here for the same reasons. We're all here for similar reasons. Like, we all want to see our chapter succeed. We're all here for service. Just sometimes we do have to remind ourselves. I mean, like I said, you're not going to be best friends with everyone. There's going to be people that you maybe don't really care for. And that's life. That's normal. You can't force people to be friends with you. You don't need to be friends with everyone. You just need to be understanding and respectful and compassionate and empathetic. And especially as a leader, like, you still have to lead people that maybe drive you insane or that you're not going to be friends with after this. And that's really okay. It's just being a leader and fostering an environment that's focused on the values of Omega Phi Alpha, that's focused on service, and that is an inclusive and welcoming place, whatever that looks like. And from the perspective of the national team, we often find ourselves in situations where we hear from chapters and it's like, whoa, like you get an email and you're like, oh, okay. So again, like, considering your choice of words when you send an email. Frequently we get emails, it's like, I need help with this, and there's like no information. I can't really help you if there's no information. It delays a resolution of the problem. So from my perspective, I would request that if you need help with something, that you reach out and you provide as much information as possible. If it's something where there's screenshots that go with it, that would be really helpful. If you're reporting something to the National Standards Board, the same thing applies. You save a lot of time, a lot of waiting, a lot of frustration if you submit a very robust report backing up everything you're saying with evidence or whatever it may be. So I know sometimes people get frustrated with us, like we're not helping them fast enough, but sometimes like it hasn't come to us in the best way, or like we don't really know how to help. So definitely giving as much information as possible is really helpful. And then also being understanding that, you know, we have 29 chapters and every single chapter has at least 6 officers. The majority of them have more than that. So that's a lot of people, you know, over 200 people that we're managing on a regular basis. And so we're fielding a lot of requests, whether that's via email or Slack, where we try our best to get back to you as soon as possible. But yeah, sometimes it's just all in the way you approach it. The kinder you are, the faster you'll get a response, I think. So, and I find that to be kind of true with a lot of things, like even the way people comment on social media. It's like, okay, there's a nice way to say, or just a little bit nicer way to say everything you want to say. So I always encourage people like, okay, take a breather, take a beat and ask yourself, like, is this the nicest way I can say this? Or is there a nicer way I can say it? So. Anything else? Any other questions or anything that you all would want to like dive deeper into if we continue this like conflict and difficult conversations topic? Olivia and Abigail, I can't remember. Are you guys like twins or just sisters? You're twins. Yes. Okay. I see. I feel like one of you told me, and maybe Olivia, that you were a twin, but I couldn't remember. We have a lot of twins. We have other Alpha Tau. There's identical twin sisters in a sorority too. Fun. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. We won't keep you any longer. If you have any questions, just reach out. Taylor and I both are happy to help. Thank you so much for coming.